We are in a very unique point in human history. Now, arguably, we always are at a unique point in human history because things are always changing. Fundamentally, we're at a point where we are on the brink of self-destruction, something which was never truly possible until now. People are polarized, they're divided along so many fronts that it seems as though this is going to culminate into some large-scale conflict of some sort. Now, among some of these polarities are the age-old East versus West, China, Russia versus NATO, Axis versus allies. You have the immigration polarity, those who embrace immigration and globalization and those who don't. You have nationalism versus globalism. You have various identity politics, man versus woman, gender versus non, race versus race. You have the resistance to the integration of cybernetic technologies and transhumanism to a more purist, humanist lifestyle. You have what's been referred to as the Artilect War, which is a merger of artificial intelligence and human beings, and those who embrace artificial intelligence and those who don't, those who rebel against automation and those who embrace it. You have the growing socioeconomic disparity, potential for trillionaires, while the wealth divide increases, even though the standard of living on the whole increases, and many people will be happy with their universal basic income pittance that is brought forward once everything does become fully automated. So within nations, you have civil disobedience, you have civil unrest as a result of rich versus poor. You have people who are for climate reform and reforming our technologies so that they are more eco-conscious, and you have those who don't. You have the family versus the state. You have religion versus religion. You have religion versus technology. You have grassroots media versus mainstream media. You have urban versus rural. You have liberal versus conservative. You have the genetically modified crowd versus the non-genetically modified crowd. And that doesn't stop at vegetables and fruits and meat and grown in petri dishes. That extends into the actual genetic modification of human beings, designer babies, people who advocate that and people who don't. When all is said and done, it basically boils down to localized versus globalized socioeconomies. You have people who are advocating for a unisex, transhumanist, fully automated, universal basic income, globalized world, and you have those who do not want that. People who want tradition, people who want their own autonomy, people who want their own agency and free will. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a spectrum here, but of all of these things, the unique aspect with all of these things is, number one, technology. We do have the capacity to destroy ourselves in more than one way. Not just destroy ourselves with nuclear weapons, but we actually have the capability now to destroy the human race with biological weapons. We have the capacity to essentially change our DNA with genetic modification, which would essentially destroy what we have known human beings to be thus far. There's artificial intelligence that could backfire in many ways. There's the Anthropocene's sixth mass extinction. We have the potential to destroy our habitat fully and completely. Shout out to Gord Downey. So the question is, what is the trigger that's going to get pulled on this that's going to make these two viewpoints clash? Because they're clashing right now, everywhere. Another divide is the divide between state authority and individual free will. We have to ask ourselves, what is the flashpoint going to be? Is it going to be economic? Is it going to be the bubble bursting? Now, we can talk very sensationally about how this coming war is going to take shape. But the fact is, it's not going to happen until people have no other choice. It's one thing that there's protests in London and there's this new wave of people who are protesting the rising heat waves and all the climate-related stuff that's going on. It's another thing for it to get to the point of actual physical conflict. I mean, it's one thing to have people marching in the streets for nationalism or pro-immigration or anti-immigration, advocating for a universal basic income versus advocating for a free market. Not that those things necessarily need to be entirely exclusive, but generally speaking, obviously, one of those forms of income is state mandated and one isn't. What do you think is going to push all this over the edge? Are we just going to gradually be assimilated into the globalized unisex hive mind? Or is there going to be a point where the resistance to that is pushed over the edge? I'm not even necessarily saying that I'm on one side or the other on all these issues, because they're all complex issues. And to just say you're on one side or the other is fine to not be a fence sitter. But if you're a thoughtful person, it's hard to commit to either full steam. Because on the one hand, you may be able to argue from an anthropological evolutionary standpoint that we are bound and destined to become a global society with a global culture. That is a precursor to interstellar exploration of any species. Would have to be some sort of global unification in some shape or form. That may not mean giving up sovereignty of nations entirely, but it certainly is to an extent going to mean that. To what extent? And is it an extent that people are going to allow? Is this a point in any civilization's development throughout the cosmos? And yes, I don't think we're the only ones in the cosmos. Is this the do or die point for any species where they can't agree to unify, so we destroy ourselves, or we set ourselves back so far that it's going to take us thousands of years to get back to where we are today? Is there going to be a major conflict? Does this conflict have to happen in order for us to finally get to the next level, to transcend a new way of doing things, to transcend a new economy? Sometimes I think that every shit hits the fan thing that we can imagine is probably going to happen, with the exception of maybe some major meteorological events. If one happens, they all happen. Dystopia, superbug, economic collapse, World War III. All of these things are going to happen concurrently, if they happen at all. What's the trigger going to be, guys? When are things going to pop off? The trigger that was supposedly the thing that started World War I, although there was a lot of other geopolitical stuff that was percolating and preceded it, was the assassination of one guy. So if that's all it takes, I think we live in potentially a more versatile world nowadays, where people are also more docile and probably not as desperate. I'm pretty sure that desperation has to be a part of this, unless the warmongers decide to jumpstart the whole process for us, which may well happen. I just watched a video by the Corbet Report. He's doing a presentation about all the parallels between that which preceded World War I and World War II and the events that are taking shape right now around the world with China. China, of course, mirroring the Axis, and NATO mirroring the Allies. He gives dozens of examples of similarities of these two things. So I believe that the climate is ripe for some serious crap to hit the fan. But like I say, people are so docile now, in order for them to become desperate enough to move in any direction with significance, it's going to take some deprivation. It's going to take the grocery stores not being able to supply food. If and when the economy finally collapses, that's probably going to set the whole thing off. That in itself, it's not just going to be an economic collapse. It's going to be all the shit hits the fan scenarios you can imagine happening at once. These times that we are living in are exponentially more unique and dangerous than ever before in human history. It's only now, out of all the millennia of eschatological predictions by Revelation's fanatics, it's only now when those things that they talk about, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, can actually come true. Never before has it been that way. Only in the last 50 to 75 years. Anyways, let me know what you think is going to be the trigger. Do you think all this stuff is just going to fizzle out and nothing's going to happen? Tell me your thoughts. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out. The best way to support this YouTube channel is to support yourself by gearing up through CanadianPreparedness.com or BugoutRoll.ca. Premium quality gear at the best possible price using the incredibly secure and easy to use Shopify platform. We offer free shipping to the United States for orders over $200 USD and free shipping to Canada over $75. So support the channel by supporting yourself.